not heard that she is not.
Okay.
Alrighty, so I'll keep an eye out for her anyway. We're at 4 o'clock. Unless you'd like to wait a little bit, that's perfectly fine. But if you're good to go, and like I said, I'll keep an eye out for Katie if she does join here.
Let me ask Andy for the action items 3, 5, and 6. Do we have guests in a waiting room?
We do here, and I'll bring them forward as the item comes.
So they're joining us and listening in the meantime?
Yep, they're I'm trying to keep track of all the names here, but we have 13 folks just listening right now to us, and I'm able to see each of them, and we'll bring them forward as the agenda items come up. I'm going to try and manage the screen so that we don't have the whole Brady Bunch effect, or we minimize it as much as we can.
Okay.
But yeah,
and
so I'm not seeing Katie in there right now, but I'm going to text John here shortly that we're ready to go, and then you can take it away.
Let Mr. Bernstrom know that we're ready to go.
Yep.
We'll give him a moment to get us up on Facebook, or can we just move straight ahead?
Just sent them, so I think you're good to go here.
Very good. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, everybody. This is the time and place for the Grand Forks Growth Fund Committee. We'll begin with roll call.
Dockler? Holt?
Here.
Weber?
Here.
Weigel?
Here.
Wolf?
Was here and
I had Chris just a moment ago. Okay.
Saying you can't hear any sound, Mr. Weber, in the chat function.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Wolf says he can't hear any sound.
Yeah.
Oh. We do have a quorum. Committee members, I'll move ahead if that sounds good to you. Very good. We've got a little bit of work to do. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the April 27th meeting.
I'll move approval.
We have a motion from Mr. Weigel, a second from Mr. Holt. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 3, FlexPace loan request, Associated Potato Growers. Ms. Richards.
We do have a request from Associated Potato Growers. Andy drafted the staff report, and Brandon Bombach from EDC. We're going to try to resume our more normal approach that we did for our in-person meetings, and Brandon will do the majority of the presentation on this one. So Brandon, go ahead.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Richards. Mr. Bombach.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brandon Bombach, the Business Development Manager for the Grand Forks Region EDC. I'm happy to join in this virtual format. First time, perhaps, I've gotten a chance to do this. Feels good to be back to normal. Associated Potato Growers Incorporated is a company that's a part of a fundamental part of our economy. That is the value-added agriculture portion of our economy. They're one of the largest grower-owned red potato packing co-ops in the Midwest with more than 40 growers. They operate climate-controlled packing and storage facilities located up and down the Red River Valley, including in Grand Forks, Grafton, and Drayton. It's time for them to upgrade some equipment, improve efficiency, and meet growing demand, which includes some of the impact of COVID as people are desiring different size packages of potatoes. So they're applying to buy new equipment that will the machinery will pack the potatoes, enabling them to fill smaller bags, which actually offer greater margins for the company and increase output by 30%. Equipment's expected to cost them $430,000, and they're requesting a FlexPace buy down on that in the amount of $22,885 from the Growth Fund, and that would leverage $42,500 from the Bank of North Dakota. It'd be used to buy down the $430 note from Bremer Bank from 5 percentage points or 4 percentage points from 5% to 1% over a 7-year term, and expected to create 2 to 3 jobs. In the application, the loan to value is 100%, which is a little higher than normal, but that includes a recent PPP loan application, and that expects forgiveness on that. So it just factored, if we took that PPP loan out, the loan to value is right where you'd expect it to be at 78%. It's secured by a corporate guarantee and a UCC filing, and this is a primary sector certified company. So with your support, the application will be heard at the Jobs Development Authority on June 1. In the audience, I guess, if there are any questions, we have the CEO of Associated Potato, Mike Torgerson, as well as the banker on this, Rick Robinson. He's the VP of Ag and Business Lending at Bremer. So we're all available if there are any questions.
Well, very good. First of all, I noticed that Mr. Wolf is with us, having some technical difficulties. Chris, there's a call-in number that might be helpful, or also the chat function. I'm not sure if Ms. Dockler is with us or not, but if she is, take any questions in the chat box as well. This is foundational to our regional and local economy, a great value ag offer opportunity, classic flex pace opportunity. Any questions from Mr. Weigel, Holt, or any other committee members to have those guests join us, or would we have a motion?
I don't have any questions unless Mr. Torgerson would like to say anything to us, I guess, but no questions at this point on my end.
As far as presentations, Mr. Bombach, JDA, it tends to be a little more a publicly accessible version of this meeting. That's where we're making the final decisions. I don't know that there would be any more questions there than we're seeing here, but is it possible for them to maybe make a brief presentation that evening?
Sure, absolutely. I'll pass on that request from the JDA chair.
Very good, and that's certainly not required, but it's just such great news, economic news for our community and for our region. Ms. Richards, when is that JDA meeting? Do we have it scheduled at this time?
Will be Monday, June 1st.
Monday, June 1st. And with that, if there are no further questions, I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Motion for Mr. Holt, second for Mr. Weigel. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, we have a presentation from Mr. Josh Teagan from the North Dakota Department of Commerce, explaining the Innovation Technology Loan Fund, the LIFT program from the state.
Correct. We invited Mr. Teagan because, as you can see from your agenda packet, our following two requests did receive LIFT assistance. So we wanted to hear from Mr. Teagan some of the particulars on that program, a little bit of the due diligence that they provide, and then have him be available as the applicants' presentations unfold if there are any questions regarding the LIFT funds attitude and approach to those questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Teagan.
Very helpful. Mr. Teagan, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you guys. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you very well. Thanks.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, so I'm Josh Teagan. I'm the head of investments and innovation for the Department of Commerce. And I also oversee the LIFT Fund. So the little bit of background on the LIFT Fund is it was created at the last legislative session as a funding mechanism to commercialize intellectual property within the state of North Dakota. So there was another program, which was Research ND, which went away at the last session, and that had a university research tie to it. LIFT does not. There's no requirement for university research. It can be, companies really of all size. And it was originally structured to be grant financing, but at the last session, in order to get it moved through, it was converted to being a loan structure. But the loan structure is 3 years of zero payments whatsoever. 2 years of interest only, and then in year 6, it converts to the Bank of North Dakota interest rate. So that's a little background on the program itself. how it's administered and kind of some background on the two companies that are under discussion is the Department of Commerce essentially intakes the applications and says, is this IP commercialization in the state? And so that's kind of the preliminary screening. Then there's a committee that's jointly appointed by the Department of Commerce and the Bank of North Dakota. They review the materials. The ones that they like, they move on to the next phase, and then those companies come in and do a live presentation. And so I guess from that standpoint, you know, the level of due diligence that Commerce provides is really just, does this meet the legislative intent that was spelled out in terms of, you know, IP commercialization in the state? And, you know, there was when Lyft was created, it was, you know, diversification of the economy and, you know, how do we bring intellectual property that's kind of sitting on the sidelines and how do we bring it forward and into the marketplace faster and without a lot of strings attached to it, which is why the really favorable loan terms. And so with that, the two, you know, companies that you guys are discussing here today, we felt, especially with the state's, I guess, propensity to invest in UAS related businesses and what that brings to the North Dakota aviation economy, the agriculture economy, the oil and gas economy, things like that was I think part of the reason that the committee felt that these were good investments.
Very good, Mr. Teagan. So you said year 6, it reverts to the Bank of North Dakota loan. Is that a balloon payment or is that the beginning of a longer period? What does that repayment look like starting year 6?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is not a balloon payment. So the loan also, I forgot to mention a key portion of it. There's zero collateral and zero personal guarantees required for the loan. So essentially the thought is, this is kind of the unwritten, you know, rule of it is the IP, you know, is either commercialized and it worked and it's in the market and it's generating revenue. If that's the case, Bank of North Dakota essentially in year 6 starts, they structure a loan, and whether that's a 5-year or 10-year AM or whatever it is, and they start making payments on it. If it doesn't work, you know, and it was worth the shot, but it doesn't pan out, the thought is that the Bank of North Dakota will essentially write it off, and you know, because there's no collateral tied to the loan, because we didn't want companies not to apply just because of the risk of it not working. That we wanted to encourage the risk taking.
Very entrepreneurial approach.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, this is the primary intent here of this program is to diversify North Dakota's economy. I notice that sometimes these loans have a match requirement, sometimes they don't. How is that determination made?
Yeah, that's a great question. So overall, there's no match required, you know, across the board. So for air autonomy specifically, the committee had reviewed it and they said, you know what, we really like this company, but we want to make sure that there's another level of market validation, or that, you know, there is an appetite from investors, you know, that maybe are more in tune with the space. So what they did is they structured that loan specifically to have a match requirement. So as funds came in, they were released from Lyft, and Air Autonomy has been able to raise pretty significant financing. I believe they've been able to access nearly all, if not all, of their amounts. So there was that market validation from them specifically that met that requirement for the Lyft loan.
Thanks. Your answers are very clear and helpful. Thank you, Josh. Committee members, Mr. Wolf.
Yes.
I can see you now. Hello.
Hey, Chris.
We can hear you.
Can
Very
you
good.
hear me? Hi, Josh. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Perfect.
Do you have a
So
question for Mr. Teagan?
I do have a couple of them. Thank you.
Please.
The walk through you mentioned the North Dakota Department of Commerce. They They validate the legislative intent. BND's involved. What's their approval process that they go through?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a ping pong approach. So Commerce designs everything on the front end. We process all the applications and kind of do the intake and kind of bring it to the committee. And I provide kind of an objective overview. Here's, maybe they're utilizing a lot of commerce programs. Maybe, there's things that I've heard in the market, kind of bring that perspective to the committee. Once the committee has voted yes, essentially it all goes over to the Bank of North Dakota from there. And the Bank of North Dakota structures the loan documents with the company and will do things, like if the committee says there needs to be a match requirement or something, that's all administered on the B&D side. So that handoff kind of takes place once the yes vote's been determined. And that allows the committee flexibility to, give B&D the kind of final veto, for lack of a better term, like if they're doing, some kind of credit checks. And so none of like the credit checks and background checks or anything like that happens on the front end. That's all kind of on the bank side. So if the bank says, yes, this is credit worthy, these are credit worthy individuals, again, there's no collateral, no personal guarantee, but we still want to be lending money to people that are going to be good stewards of it. And so that's kind of the check and balance that B&D provides.
Sure. Thank you. I know that this is an exciting program. It's relatively new still. How many of these have we done to this point, Josh?
Yeah, so dollar value wise, I believe there's been about $6.5 million spent. It's a $15 million fund in total. I think about 6.5 has been awarded. I would say total ask to this point has probably been over 50. So the committee's been really conservative with the funding, which was actually slightly surprising to us. There were a lot of really good companies that didn't get funded through the first few rounds. So the committee's been very, very conservative with awarding the financing. The number of deals, I think that $6.5 million is probably spread out between 6 to 8 deals.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. And Josh, with that, is there the deals that are coming through? These are, they're fitting in within the requirements, but are they typically at early pre-revenue stages? Are there banks involved, or is this all through the Department of Commerce and Bank of North Dakota directly? What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. And it's a little bit all over the board, but at the same time, it's not. So, for example, it's public information that Appario in Fargo was awarded funding. So Appario is a very large company. At the time, they had, north of, I think 100 and some employees, I think over 200 employees. Yeah, they were about 220 employees, but they had this, piece of intellectual property that was essentially sitting on the shelf. They said, we'd love to get to this, but our core business, we have to pour our funding in here. So they came to Lyft and they said, if we could take this piece and move it into the market with this money, that would be, here's the value add. And so that's what Lyft funded. It wasn't, general operating expenses for Appario. It was specific to that, piece of IP. The vast majority of applications that we've received have been earlier stage companies where, there's a proof of concept, there's some validation in the market, and it's hey, we need to add these 4, features and functionality, and that would really give us a robust solution and allow us to build a bigger business. So it's been a blend. Bushel is another well-known company. They were just awarded $1 million at the last meeting because they had this, thing, and Bushel's raised over $19 million in the last, 12 months. But there was this piece that was sitting on the sidelines that was really beneficial. And so Lyft was able to take that and bring that into the market. So it's a little all over the board, but I would say early stage, non-bankable, really kind of venture type investments have been the predominant feeling for the deals that we've done.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
You
So,
bet. Good to
Josh,
see you
help
again.
me make sure I'm understanding. It's kind of a shorthand. The LIFT committee assesses the potential of the technology, looking to diversify the state's economy, and then the Bank of North Dakota is the entity that really does the corporate and personal due diligence.
That's correct. Yeah. And there's a little bit, I mean, if there's some obvious things on the front end that, we're aware of at Commerce, we bring those forward. But yeah, the committee's really in charge of validating the business case and the technology itself. And so we have committee members kind of from all areas. We do have a couple of UAS experts, but largely these people are investors. We have, Bart Holliday is a well-known, name, especially in Grand Forks. He sits on the committee as very diligent, prudent investor. Loris Molbert, who's a venture capitalist. We have, really kind of strong business people that are making these decisions. And so the vetting of the business model, I mean, if a company comes in and says, here's a cool piece of technology and there's not the financials and the business case and everything to back it up, it does not move forward because it gets picked apart.
And Josh, do you serve on the committee or do you help implement the decisions of the committee?
So I'm not a voting member, but I kind of provide my perspective of, being a early stage entrepreneur and then also being on the investment, the venture capital side as well. So I provide kind of my perspective, really fact-based on, here's what I know about the people and the company and here's how it fits as a kind of bringing together the here's the state's objectives from the governor's office down to commerce and, how does this fit within diversification of the economy? Here's where this, fits or doesn't fit and kind of provide that more factual context behind things, but I'm not a voting member.
Okay. If the committee is chaired by Commissioner Comer.
Personally.
I'm sorry?
I have personally invested in some of the Lyft companies that have come through too. So
okay.
I'd say I don't vote, but sometimes I do invest.
I see. And the committee is chaired by Commissioner Comer?
Yes.
Okay. So some of us have already, we've all read the staff reports that we're going to be reviewing today. And some of us have heard from Josh and Brianna. As you know, dynamic business people with a lot of enthusiasm, excitement for their ideas. Would you care to make any comment before we hear from them? Because you've been reviewing these proposals for a while.
Yeah, I'll give you the journey that they each took through the Lyft committee. So Brianne came in and no one understood the business the first time around whatsoever. And there was one committee member that said, no,
Facebook would have been really hard to understand at some point, right?
Yeah. And
okay.
It was just application material. So it was an application and a pitch deck. That was it. There was no presentation, anything. So she got, instead of an approval or a denial, she got sent back for, hey, give us more information. We don't get it. But there was one committee member that said, no, this is a story worth hearing. So she came back, provided more information, and the additional information she provided was at least enough where the committee members said, we just have to hear the pitch because there's some holes that we see, but it's intriguing. We got to see the pitch. So she came in and pitched, and after she presented and people understood kind of the business model and the data piece of it was really the IP that we saw that was moving to commercialization. It kind of stuck, and it was, I think people were impressed with her even more so than the business idea.
Yes.
Willingness to just kind of force things into being, and that's a great entrepreneurial trait. And so that was kind of her journey through Lyft was, I'd say, maybe the most tumultuous one of, she really had to prove herself because there was not a lot of appetite to do it from the first meeting. and then ultimately, ended up convincing the committee of investing. And so that was hers. And I would say it was the 75% of the investment was because of who she was, and then the rest of it was related to the business, but they did really like the business. For Josh and Airtonomy, I would say the committee was really excited about the technology. Tommy Kenville, who is a well-known name, especially in Grand Forks, he sits on the committee. He kind of provided his personal experience with Airtonomy and kind of validated that yes, this technology was beneficial in this industry. And I think a lot of the committee members kind of looked to his opinion for that validation. And so in doing that, they thought it was a very capable team. And Josh, was asked really to validate, the market and the customers and the fact that he could raise money and everything in order to get the financing. He did check all of those boxes. And so that was one that I felt had the possibility where it could have fallen flat, where it would have been a great idea, but he wasn't going to be able to get the market validation, but he did. And so I think that one, even since we invested, has actually gained more positive momentum than it had going into it. So, yeah.
Very good. We have a question in the chat box from Council President Dana Sandy. And I don't know if this is a question for Josh when he gives his pitch, but I'll ask you too. Is it fair to anticipate that Josh could count on better guidance from the state legislature in the future?
I guess in what regards, which guidance are we referring to?
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll see if he clarifies that question, but I know I appreciate you coming in and making the time to meet with us. This is a new program. It's rapidly evolving. And Mr. Sandy's here. Why don't we, Dana, do you want to offer some clarification to your question there? Well, while we're waiting for Dana, again, thanks for taking the time to explain this new program to us, its intent, some of the process involved. It's one thing to hear the pitches from the two entrepreneurs that'll be presenting here in a moment, but because of the newness of this program, it's helpful to get this background. I appreciate you taking the time. Dana.
You bet.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Weber. Yeah, sorry, a million things going on. It feels like, Josh, it feels like the LIFT committee is making decisions and they're actually making policy rather than implementing the policy that should have come out of the legislature. Wondering if you are in agreement with that and if you believe there's going to be any better guidance provided.
Yeah, it's a great question. And in Commissioner Comer's words, we're building the plane as we fly it, essentially. The legislature came out and the actual bill was like a page long. And all it said was, Commerce does this, Bank of North Dakota does this. And there was no other guidance. And so as Commerce and as the bank, we don't actually have the power in the legislature to influence any or make any of those decisions. The committee has to make all of those decisions. So in the early phases, there was a lot of discussion of what is IP? How do you define that? Do we have a amount that makes sense per deal, or what metrics are we using? So a lot of that, I think, has been built into internal policy. I do expect, and this is total speculation because there's been a lot of talk, will LIFT be renewed for the next session? And what does that look like? And, I think my personal opinion is it'll go one of two ways. Either it will be completely shut down altogether because of budgetary constraints, or it's going to be like $50 million for LIFT, where they'll say this worked, we proved out kind of the pilot, here's a bigger chunk of money, and with that bigger chunk of money is going to come with here's what we want to see and here's some more specific guidelines around it. So I think this $15 million trial run was really to see what the committee came up with, and I think the legislature will take that, they'll build on it, they'll put some boxes around things, and they'll either really double down on the investment or they'll get rid of it altogether.
But don't you then, the legislature or Commerce is putting all their eggs into the people that they choose to put on that committee? How do the people that got put on the committee get vetted in the first place?
Yeah. So they were jointly appointed by the Bank and Commerce, and that's really what the legislature, the way they structured it was they said, rather than giving the power to a state agency, we're going to let state agencies appoint, who they think, meets this legislative intent, and let those private business people craft what makes the most sense, in the private markets. And so that's what the intent was. And, I would say in interacting with all the different boards and committees.
Oh, it looks like Mr. Teagan is frozen up for a moment, or maybe just on my screen.
No, he was getting to the punchline.
Investors and entrepreneurs. So I do think that the objective was achieved through that process.
Sure.
Very good. All right, Dana, I'm seeing now that I'd confused my Joshes, and I understand your question better now. It was an important question. Of course, all of this is background to the real issues before the committee today. What do we do with a couple of asks connected to the LIFT fund? So are there any final questions before we move on to item number 5? Very good. Thank you again, Josh, for meeting with us today. And Ms. Richards, or who's taking item number 5 then?
I would be happy to introduce them, Brett, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Baumbach. Yes, please.
Just a couple of words, introduction-wise, and then right into the company's presentations. These next 2 projects align really closely with what that LIFT program in the state's been trying to do, with diversifying the economy being at the heart of that. And under the mayor's leadership, we've supported a very similar strategy. At the State of the City address, we heard a lot about the ambition for a downtown tech campus. We had a great deal of momentum going for some time, especially under the leadership of City Council President Sandy. But then COVID had kind of put some things on hold, including a budding relationship with Microsoft TechSpark. But these tech-based companies have only seen greater demand for their product really since COVID, and they're going to tell you all about that. They present a real opportunity to grow through COVID and further diversify the economy and protect against economic downturns like this in the future. It's a little bit of the logic of bringing these forward. And the EDC board, we've heard from both of these companies, we've reviewed the loan applications, and some of the conversation that took place at the board included a recognition that less than 1% of startup capital is available in the Midwest, and even less in North Dakota. We also noted that growing companies seeking investment most likely find themselves on the East and West Coast seeking those investments, and some of those venture capital funds work to attract those companies to the coasts. So today we wanted to present these opportunities with all of that in mind, hear from 2 promising companies. Due to the similarity of their requests, I suggest that we hear from them both prior to taking action on one or the other. And assuming that makes some sense, then what I'll do is I'll first introduce the Air Autonomy team. And then, of course, if there are any questions pertinent to their presentation, there'll be time for Q&A. And then we'll introduce Taylor Ree and hear from them before a larger conversation.
Committee members, are we okay with that process to hear from both presenters and then vote on them afterwards? Okay, very good, Mr. Baumbach. So we'll start off with Mr. Reedy.
Yeah, so just really quickly, today, we have co-founders Josh Reedy and Jim Higgins here, as well as I think Chuck Pino from UND Aerospace Foundation, as they're a founding partner in the company. They're an autonomous UAS or drone company innovating their industry. You'll recall that they received $50,000 in support from the JDA in early 2019 to leverage a Microsoft TechSpark grant. Since there have been many updates, including having earned $1 million loan through LIFT. So Josh, if it's all right, I'll hand it over to you for the next 10 minutes or so.
Hey, thanks, Brandon. Question to Bandy, I didn't get a chance to answer. Do we present, or is Becca or someone presenting, like for EDC?
You certainly can present if you'd like. I can give you the ability to share screen if you'd like.
I have the slides up, so you want
Okay.
to my ugly mug then as well.
Alrighty, you should be good to go.
Sounds good. Let me pull that up and let me know, folks, if you can see that.
Can see it now. Thanks, Josh.
All right. I know some of you have heard this many times, so I'll try to make this short and sweet. Before I do that, if Josh Teigen is still on, I appreciate his work, James Lehman, Michelle Comer, and the LIFT committee. For a technology startup company, having resources like LIFT and the consideration of the request we have before you is essential for the reason that Brandon made mention of, the fact that there is so little venture capital that's available, not only in the Midwest, but in North Dakota. It makes things vital. Two things from Josh Teigen's comments I'd like to build upon is the fact that in terms of scrutiny, in terms of validation, we have went through that in spades, and we take that with a great deal of pride that we've had wonderful partners and a wonderful experience building truly innovative technology that will have intellectual property and patents behind it. This is the very best, I think, of the UAS community in the state and in this Grand Forks area coming together. And I say that having the Aerospace Foundation as a partner. We're very fortunate to have great people. Today, I can tell you we're working with Xcel Energy and UND and the Northern Plains Test Site to get a waiver approved. And although that waiver may or not be approved, it is something that is cutting edge, and it is something that wouldn't be possible without this type of partnership. So when you can add companies like Xcel Energy and Microsoft into that strong local ecosystem, we can do some pretty amazing things. I keep talking about this, but the reality is autonomy exists between the two people that you see on the slide, and that's Governor Doug Burgum and the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella. They have created an environment that I hope North Dakota can exploit, because it truly is the future of unmanned systems, not just aviation or aircraft systems, but unmanned systems overall. And that is being able to provide the vision for a way a state can handle large-scale infrastructure, and the way Microsoft has positioned its Azure platform in particular to take advantage of that. And Airtonomy sits, again, right in between those two aspects. And it's a really good place to be with really good partners, as I mentioned a moment ago. One point I was asked to speak to the COVID response. I think we can say it's more than a response. COVID has brought to light why tools like Airtonomy are necessary. We have a very unique approach, and from the very first week that we had lockdown, we didn't give up. Rather, we opened up our technology to the world, and we have invited people from all over the country to not just see Airtonomy, but to see it in action by launching inspections from Devils Lake, North Dakota, from all over the place. That has been wonderful. And we are enabling workers not to have to put themselves in jeopardy by bringing a tool to their site, not bringing more people to their site. And that has been met with a great deal of enthusiasm. I mentioned a moment ago, we are actually still working on that waiver. The reason we're working on it is we're really pushing the envelope with the FAA to maximize the use of this technology. We want to expand drone usage beyond professional pilots and to enable practically anyone to use drone-based technology. And we believe that's the key to really opening up the market and letting the UAS sector blossom. I spoke to validation a moment ago. I'm not going to rehash all of this. I'm going to focus on the updates down below. First and foremost, we won our first RFP. As you've heard others say, we went up against existing companies in the industry, and I'm going to show you in a moment why that is phenomenal. But we went toe-to-toe with the biggest in the industry, and we were the David to the Goliath, and we walked away with our first major win. We're happy for that. We filed our first patent. That is going through right now. We have had drone companies and hardware manufacturers come to us by virtue of our partnership with Xcel as well as Microsoft. And I can tell you there's names that you would recognize. We're under non-disclosure. We can't talk about that yet. But I do foresee some very big partnerships coming to light. And none of this could have happened had it not been the support of Microsoft and Excel in particular. When it comes to Microsoft, we've pulled off a trifecta no one else has had. We have TechSpark funding, as we've mentioned before. We are in the advanced stage of their startups program, and we also received what they call an AI for Earth grant, working with Dr. Susan Faligi from the University of North Dakota. And that work is actually being implemented on site with her graduate students as we speak. Why the RFP I mentioned was so big. Air autonomy cuts across many sectors, but if I point to the wind turbine inspection category alone, there are 2 companies there that can claim they are fully autonomous. You see how much money they have raised in their last funding alone. Their last funding round at the end of 2019, they raised $49 million, and Air Autonomy has won the RFP against them. That is significant, but I can tell you, if you want to have those wins keep coming, we do need to fund. Our competition has raised on average of $68.2 million. We've raised roughly $1.8 million to date and counting. We are proud that those funds have come from institutional investors, another level of scrutiny. We've also had grant competition or grant funds come in with the University of North Dakota. We are seeking $6 million from a variety of sources. We're making steps toward that, but we do have ground to make up if we want to be competitive in this landscape. And that is why the funding is so very important. Last but not least, we know that there is not necessarily a requirement to give back to Grand Forks, but we are strong believers in supporting the technology startup ecosystem in Grand Forks, UAS technology in particular. This is our opportunity as a community to show Microsoft TechSpark what it's like to rally around a company. We have done a fine job there, but as you all know, it's how you write the last chapter of the story that I think is going to be most meaningful and what's remembered. By doing so, I think we can even add more visibility to our Silicon Valley moniker. I think the difference being is having the focus on technology and artificial intelligence, things other than the drone hardware itself. We have been very active in assisting public safety efforts, bringing this technology to those efforts to help people. And last but not least, we have real jobs being created in North Dakota, in Grand Forks. Those jobs pay well, they have benefits. They're the types of jobs people can make a career of. They can own homes, they can spend their money in businesses that are located locally. We have 9 internships, 2 Research North Dakota grants, 1 AI for Earth grant. We're all very proud of that. We're very proud to call Grand Forks home. And with that being said, I'm going to defer to my co-founder, Jim Higgins and Chuck Pinio for their comments. Jim?
I don't have much to add. I just want to say one quick thing on that average salary. Just keep in mind the salary is $70,000 we have 10 employees right now, about to add an 11th. Average salary is $70,000, and we pay 20% benefits. We're still, believe it or not, a little bit below market because we hire a lot of computer scientists and people with advanced degrees. But we're able to get folks here because we're also able to incentivize them with a little bit of equity and because they believe in the vision. But Josh is right. It's about the jobs here, and we're excited to be here. We're excited to be a Grand Forks company that beat the socks off Cobotics from China and SkySpecs from Michigan, both funded 10x, if not more, above us, and we're going to continue to beat them, especially with your help. Thank you.
Chuck?
Yeah, I think it's obvious the 2 founders are very passionate, which is also important to us. But you know, the technology and the artificial intelligence has been verified by companies like Microsoft and others. The commercialization has been verified by Excel, Ottertail, and others. So really for us, that's and this is all going on during COVID when a lot of companies are a little more stagnant. So really proud of what they're doing and really appreciate the support we've gotten from a lot of you on this call already, but certainly hope that you'll continue to support us and look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck and Jim. And with that, again, appreciate your consideration. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Would you stop sharing your screen, Josh, so we can come back to the...
Yes, let me see.
Or if Andy has to do that.
There we go. Good.
Very good. Any questions for the presenters from committee members or anyone else?
Hey, say, Josh, this is Chris Wolf. Thank you for an update. I've heard it multiple times, continue to be very impressed with this opportunity. Only question would be is on the funding sources raised today, could you high level, maybe not even amounts necessarily, but who has helped get to the, was it 1.7 thus far? What are the parties that are invested thus far in either equity or potential loans?
Sure. We have a pretty long list, Chris, but those that come to mind, the UND Aerospace Foundation. We have former Microsoft executives from Seattle, in particular. One gentleman whom you've met, many of you have met, Dinesh, who was the person responsible for the drone program at Microsoft. They have a venture fund they've started called Rockpile Ventures. And then we are the first Grand Forks company for the 701 Angel Fund to invest in. Outside of that, we have a large chunk of funding from the Renewable Energy Grant in the Renewable Energy Commission in North Dakota. And right now, that does not count any of the private or sweat equity we've put in. We've simply chosen not to put that in, but myself, Jim, others have put quite a bit in above and beyond that. We are right now actively working with one investor whom we can't name, but a North Dakota investor. We are trying to close upwards of a $2 million investment. So that is something that we've exchanged legal documents on, and we're working toward using more or less the same ask that we're making of this group to a private investor.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks for working on this and working in Grand Forks in the region.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Let's move to the next presentation then, and hear on Taylor Reed, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Weber. I can introduce Brianne and Taylor Reed. I'd also just note that the request being made in the application is a loan of $500,000 structured just like the LIFT loan. And again, we'll have a broader conversation about that, and especially as Keith can share some of the insights from the EDC conversation. So Brianne, as you see her here, is coming from Taylor Reed, representing the company. She is the founder of the company. It's a social tech platform that connects brands and customers tailored to their preferences. She knows retail as the owner of a local shop, Curious, that you've seen around town. But she too has been successful with the LIFT process, earning a $750,000 loan in addition to raising other local angel investments. So Brianne, the floor is yours.
Great. I'm going to present my screen here. Andy, could you allow that to happen?
Yep, should be good to go.
There you go. We can see. Oh,
can you see it?
There we go. Yep, we sure can.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you all again for having us here today and allowing us to present. I know many of you have seen portions of this. So as Josh Teigen mentioned, many people, when I explain Taylor for the first time, they have no idea what I'm talking about because it's a brand new innovative concept that we're working on, getting better at explaining it. But today I'm going to focus more on the why we do what we do rather than the how or the what. And I'm happy to answer specific questions as well. And also, just talking about the funding opportunities that are here, they made mention to how difficult it is to raise in the Midwest, but also one of the barriers for us at Taylor is a female founding team. Less than 2% of all venture capital goes to females. So we're up against two quite large obstacles, but we've had some success. I'm excited to share that with you as well. So going back to Brandon's comment, what we do, Taylor is a social platform that's going to change the way that brands and consumers discover one another. And why we started digging into this, there's multitudes of reasons, but here are some of the top three. So number one is we're living in this type of economy that I like to call the concierge economy. So people are expecting personalized results everywhere that they go. You can see here that Google searches were up 80% when people are asking best for me. So whether that's the best credit card for me, the best hair salon for me, whatever it may be, people want to know what's best for them. Also with data privacy legislation, as Josh Teigen also mentioned, it's really the core of our platform, and we're really taking a look at how consumers' data is handled online. And we're trying to provide a better option for them to have some control over how their data is stored and shared, and how we can evolve that process. And thirdly, the rise of conscious consumerism. So I know we talked about this last time I saw you all, but millennials really want to know where their products are coming from, why, the story behind them, what the values are. It's more than just a product. What people really want today is a story. And COVID has now added 3 additional reasons as to why tailoring is growing in importance. We had explored these early on, but we're seeing it dramatically shift right now too. So as we've been onboarding brands to the platform, many of them have had to pivot their operations away from direct business to business, like wholesale distribution, to direct business to consumer. Tailoring helps them to reach consumers in a much more streamlined fashion. We're also seeing a rally around small business. So people want to know what they can purchase locally, who's creating products in their region. And thirdly, the increased importance of discovery in general. So I always like to talk about retail and why there's magic in retail still. And we like to say it's about the serendipitous type of discovery. When you walk into a store and you discover something new for the first time and it kind of excites you. When we're going away from this and we see brick and mortar changing rapidly, how can we still create serendipitous discovery digitally? So those are the big reasons, but then this is where we really dig in. So at Tailoring, we believe that the modern consumer is misunderstood. And a big reason about this is because of the way that their data is being handled online. So we are measured by our behavioral actions digitally. So the cookies that are put on our computer, our search history, what we like, who we follow. But what that does is it paints a really, really fuzzy picture of the consumer. At Tailoring, we like to call this data-driven humans because it's not a clear picture. It's who they think, who the computer scientists or the algorithms think each individual is. But in this new economy, like I mentioned, this concierge type where we have everything from Netflix recommends to Apple Music, giving you personalized results everywhere where you go, consumers expect this and they want to see it also in the way that they consume. But there's not a great way to do it right now because how they're being served is by ads, not by actual connection. So at Tailoring, we involve the humans. We're a very human forward, human centric company. We involve humans in how their data is handled. So we say we create human driven data. So we also look at the behavioral actions that consumers take, but we use our technology to confirm all behavioral assumptions that are made to make sure that we're painting an accurate picture of our humans or our consumers, as you can see here. Another reason that Tailoring is incredibly excited and why we jumped into it is because the market is ginormous. So we're sitting in a very interesting space between digital advertising and data analytics. And digital advertising surpassed traditional advertising for the first time in 2019 in dollars spent. But then you look over at data analytics and how that's growing in increased importance, especially for small businesses online, trying to get access to the same type of analytics to allow them to compete in this new digital world. And the reason we're doing this by a mobile application for our consumers is because that mobile dominates. So 2/3 of this ad spend is going directly to mobile. Here's a little sneak peek of the Tailoring difference. So our 3 core foundations, I guess I can say. Number 1, we are humanized technology by adding the human voice to AI. And then secondly, we empower consumers to be a part of the conversation. And by doing so, what we can really do is create this assumption-free data for brands at an incredibly affordable rate. And we're marrying customer acquisition and data analytics for small and medium-sized businesses to get a true and accurate representation of who their customers are so that we can connect them at the right time. Here's a snapshot of our progress. So we're a team of 6 full-time, but we also have 2 large contracting teams. One of them is an engineering team. There's 6 there. We also just began to work with a new marketing agency with a team of 5. To date, we've raised $1.65 million. That comes between 2 main sources. Number 1, private investors, which are all local to North Dakota. And then secondly, $750,000 from Lyft, We've already went through the vetting process. Our loan is actually closing tomorrow, so the funds will be coming tomorrow, which is incredibly exciting. So we've checked all those boxes. We launched to brands in March, and we've already onboarded 175 to the platform. Our goal for the year is 750, which would put us at a really great position we're excited about. Our next steps here, we're finishing up the development of the mobile applications for consumers. This should be done in the next 2 to 3 months. And that's where it leaves us, our funding request. So the 3 main reasons we're closing out our funding round. Our actual goal for our seed round was $2 million. As you saw, we're at 1.65. So we're very, very close to closing that gap now. And with that, that'll get us about 24 months of runway to finalize and commercialize the platform. We have job creation, which we are very excited about hiring here locally. We've also partnered with UND, and we have 3 amazing interns starting this summer. We're hoping that they can grow with the company, and that's incredibly exciting for us. Also acceleration. So we're acquiring brands at such a rapid rate that our growth team is not able to keep up. So we're opening some additional positions to continue that growth. And then thirdly, we're planning a national consumer launch campaign. So a big marketing campaign that'll be rolling out here in August. And thank you again for allowing me to be here today. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Very good. Any questions for Brianne? I get so excited every time I hear your pitch, Brianne. It's I can't wait to get to log on there. Yes.
Is it getting better, Brett? Am I improving?
It was pretty dynamic the first time out, but I get to hear something a little new each time. So
okay.
Thanks.
Of course.
Hey,
Any
Brett,
questions from committee members?
I got a question.
Please.
Brianne, we on the city council, I feel like I consistently hear about local businesses and retail and the hardships that so many retail places are facing in the Grand Forks community. I feel like we only hear about it in Grand Forks, but it's happening everywhere throughout the state and throughout the country. How will your product help some of the local bricks and mortar? Will it help bricks and mortar at all? That's kind of my question, and you can run with it wherever you want to go with it.
Sure. Well, I think we know that retail is changing nationally. So, our intent is to help local brick and mortar stores, wherever their local may be. But what we really see is them also pivoting to a more dynamic workplace, I guess you could say, where they're combining their brick and mortar with a digital experience. It's just a requirement as we continue to move in this new direction. But how we see this helping local businesses is that they're able to reach their consumers in a new way, a far more direct way, aligning them with the people who are looking for those types of products. Also very interesting here is that in the beginning, we're focusing more on brands, so the creators, the wholesalers, but as we grow, we have the opportunity for brick and mortar retail businesses to say, hey, I found this product, but where can I find it locally? And we'll direct them directly to that local retailer. So that's kind of like phase 2 as we progress, but we definitely see that happening.
So as a consumer, if one of my primary goals is to shop local, and I've had just during COVID here, 3 birthdays, Mother's Day, and some other anniversaries, etc. Sometimes I knew what product I wanted, and I could just go to Amazon and have it shipped to the door, but I wanted to buy local. Or in other cases, I didn't know what gift to give my wife or child or whoever. If they were registered with you, you'd be able to offer me gift ideas, and you could help me connect with local retailers. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And the other thing that we do is a lot of times people don't know the types of products they may be interested in. So if you give us a sense of what that is, then we can direct you to if you say local is one of your values, we can direct you to local retailers who will have options that will align with your interests, tastes, and preferences, or those of the person that you're shopping for.
Even if they have to order it to be brought in, I'd rather give them the money than just going direct to Amazon.
Well, correct. And I think what's really interesting about the platform and another way that it'll support retailers in the future is that it's right now when I go to buy for my stores, I'm doing it on what I believe to know about my customers because I'm interacting with them on a daily basis. But we're going to be able to power small retailers with data to make better decisions. So we'll say, hey, this is what's happening in your area. There's a lot of interest for this type of product. We recommend you carrying this type of product, and then we can alert the customers in your area that you now have it. And so it's really combining that with data analytics to help them support their business model.
And one of the amazing things about your idea and with Josh's work is that the COVID realities have made your ideas even more relevant.
Yeah, it really, really has. And also too, like going back to that North Dakota factor, I forgot to bring this up, but when we talk to brands on a daily basis, they're like, so you guys are in Silicon Valley, right? Like you must be Silicon Valley. And we're like, no, we're in North Dakota. And we come from a small business background, and then they get even more excited. So it's a big part of our story, and we're very happy to be here.
Great, thanks. Any further questions for Brianne? All right.
No questions from me. Just a quick comment. I just think with both companies here that we've seen, what's been great, I've been able to see both of your presentations a number of times. It's been great to see the momentum that's been built. And both companies have really looked globally, but remain focused on the community here. And both companies have been community minded. They've invested in Grand Forks. Yes. And I think that's really important. So it's just a note, and I wanted to give you both kudos on that. So thanks.
And Keith, with these ideas, we're also trying to move in some innovative ways in terms of leveraging JDA dollars. Can you talk about that?
Sure, absolutely. And I just want to, I know we're running out of time here, but I want to make a couple comments. I so appreciate Josh Teigen being here. You know, I witnessed the LIFT program sort of move through the legislative process, and Josh is obviously right in that it was intended to be grants, but then converted to loans. But the real impetus was really to diversify the state's economy. I think there was a strong recognition that we were investing pretty heavily in traditional economic development. Not that that's bad, but you know, there's the technology as a way to diversify and looking towards the future. So I really appreciate that. It was a previous Commerce Commissioner who did a report, provided a report to the legislature that said a full 2/3 of North Dakota's economy is commodity based. We're more diverse in the Grand Forks region, but you know, it's really to step away from that to really you know, to smooth out some of the highs and the lows in terms of that. You know, our EDC board took a look at this, and they were very impressed with the technology and the market potential. Really impressed with the entrepreneurs. I think you can see why. Impressed with the fact that they went through the state due diligence, and the state was investing, and also the private investment that they had. I want to talk a little bit about our board. You know, unanimously encouraged us to take this to the Growth Fund Committee for consideration. They also, though, thought that, you know, they had some significant upside, and their motion was not only to forward it, but to encourage the Growth Fund to consider an equity investment to participate in potentially a larger upside, you know, if both companies realized the success that they were projecting. And I'm really happy. We had a conversation with Josh and Brianne separately, and she had a conversation with city staff and the city attorney. And I think it's fair to say that probably moving forward, the debt model we have in the place, position of a creditor, probably at this stage makes a lot of sense. What both Brianne and Josh have offered, we're moving this forward with lift terms, and that's no payments and no interest for the first 3 years. And within that first 3-year timeframe, both had offered an option for the Growth Fund to convert to an equity type investment if the Growth Fund would choose that option within that timeframe. So I really see that as the best of both. We're moving forward with debt in the creditor's position, but moving forward, if the company has an equity event, which would be a Series A or an acquisition, or if the Growth Fund Committee felt that, you know, they were really projected and moving towards a big win, that they can convert that debt into something that looks like equity. We need to spend a little bit of time talking about the model in which that would be under. It's called a SAFE agreement, and Brandon actually does a better job of articulating it. I could probably fumble my way through it and do okay. But ultimately, you'd be converting, if you so choose, to a model whereby if they hadn't had an equity event, such as I described, you would be investing, and you would then be positioned to get a stake in the company based on what that future investment would look like based on that equity. Again, it's completely at the growth fund's option. It would be debt right out of the chute, but you could, if you sniffed a win, a big win, you could convert and ride the wave with the company. I'll use that terminology. So Brandon, you could probably do a much better job of talking about the SAFE model.
I think you did a really great job, and you made mention that we've connected with the city attorney, and the exact mechanism is still going to be worked out. But you know, as Keith mentioned, a lot of the conversation at the EDC was just there's risk involved with this, which is important work to be doing, and you need to consider that. But without the equity investment or something similar to it, there's very limited upside potential.
Very good. Mr. Weigel.
Just real briefly, Mr. Weber. Personally, this is just me. I'm more comfortable with the loan structure. I hear all too often the city shouldn't be owning properties. And at the same time, I don't think we should be owning equity in businesses as well. I'm more comfortable, obviously, if they're wanting a loan, I'm more willing to do that. But I think I don't think it's the city's job to be investing in businesses. And I think that once again, people could construe it as us picking winners and losers of where our money goes and everything along those lines. So just food for thought.
Yeah, there's always this tension. We're being told to stay in our wheelhouse, but also to act more like business. So there's tension around that. I believe, and Keith, you can confirm this, our initial approach is to go with the loan, and we're making no obligation to the equity position. That's just an option that's open to us down the road. Is that right?
It's an option of 100% at the discretion of the growth fund, or the Jobs Development Authority. So it would be debt out of the chute. And, you know, quite frankly, if either company had an acquisition that could immediately convert to equity, and you could have an immediate payoff. So I'm not sure why you wouldn't take the, you're right, Councilman Weigel, I mean, in terms of the way you're thinking about this, but there may be a situation, maybe, that if you convert, you could have an immediate win. And if that's put right in front of you, I would suspect that anyone would choose that immediate win.
And so, Brandon,
can I just add
Go ahead, please.
I really want to thank both entrepreneurs in terms of their flexibility and the conversation that we had, and what I think is a kind of a cake and eat it too scenario. So I think they recognize that this investment comes from public funds, and acknowledge that and want to do as best as they possibly can. They've articulated to you and to me personally they want to grow their companies here and be a Grand Forks company, and they also, if possible, want to have a win financially from the growth fund if it turns out that way. So I want to thank Josh and Brianne personally.
Very good. I'll reiterate that. With about 8 minutes to go, we have to clear the room for council. We have to dust off the floor, etc. I don't know what takes so much time, but anyway, with 8 minutes left, Ms. Richards or Mr. Bombach, can you articulate quickly exactly what's being asked of the committee today in terms of a recommendation to the JDA?
Yes, sure. The way that the applications are written right now is the amounts for air autonomy would be a $500,000 loan, structured just the way that the lift was described. 3 years, 0%, no payments. The following 2 years at 2%, interest only. And then it is written as a balloon payment in year 6, which we heard a little bit earlier may not be the case. Just the same, the amount for the Taylor reapplication is $375,000. Obviously, the motion you choose to make after a little bit of this conversation we've had is up to you.
Any further questions or comments?
Mr. Weber.
Weber.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes, I will be requesting to recuse myself from the vote on both of these, but if it would be okay to ask a policy question or big picture item.
Yes, please.
Just curious on where the funds, the dollars would come from, and what that, what percentage that would be, or what would that be as far as our overall portfolio on loans versus, what would it be? Have we do these things would be my first question for maybe
Ms.
Meredith
Richards?
or Ms. Richards.
Well, as you know, the LIFT program is new, and we're mirroring a new program. So if you look at our policies and procedures, you won't see this listed. It is considered a loan, so that's mostly what we do. We could certainly look at grants, but typically when we do grants, they're more in the line of to an entity to do a study, not to a for-profit business. And, Keith, you've got longer history with this than I do. I know back in the day, grants were more common, but in recent memory, if we're doing business assistance, it's in the form of a loan. And if we do a grant, it's typically to an agency or a nonprofit to do studies to assist our region or our work in collecting data.
Oh, excuse me, Meredith. How much cash do we have available to do something with right now?
Boy, I don't have the number in front of me. We have sufficient to do this, obviously. Maureen just gave a presentation last month, and I don't have those spreadsheets at hand. But while we don't have a line item budget for these kind of new programs, we certainly do have the cash available to do it.
And we don't have the percentage as far as like a portfolio allocation. So my thought would be is request, and Mr. Weigel started there, would be in the future having an updated policy for this type of program. It is a new program. I think I would recommend it be included in the policy, as well as if there would be any equity considered, how would it be, and what percentage of the portfolio should it be? Those are my comments from a global standpoint.
Very good. And we're hoping for June. We've been surprised at how busy the JDA has been during COVID. People continue to be bullish on Grand Forks and look for ways to invest. But hopefully in June, we would have a little more time for those policy discussions. Is that what we're anticipating, Ms. Richards?
Well, as you mentioned, we're going to hit the deadline here to cease broadcasting so we can convert to council broadcast. But yes, I understand Mr. Wolf's desire to be thoughtful and do this in a strategic and policy-driven approach. But we don't have time for that today, but we can certainly make that top of the agenda for June.
And Mr. Weigel had a question, and then Mr. Lund.
I'd just defer to Mr. Phelan.
Mr. Weber, the question was asked by Mr. Wolf, the dollar amount. So this would be for 5996, and these are the presentations that were made a few weeks ago. And so if you look at the Jobs Development Authority, or 5996, we had about $7.8 million, we'll say, for deals or strategic initiatives. That will increase in years 21 and forward, anticipating sales of property, both the Corporate Center 1 and 2 and Cirrus. So that's anticipated to go up probably around to the $15 million plus range. And so that's kind of what we're looking for regarding deals. And obviously, if you add we're in the range of about 800,000 plus with both of these. So just so you know kind of where we're at. And of course, we want to treat these as loans that they will be repaid over time. But just so you know what the dollar amounts that you saw a few weeks ago.
Very good. And Mr. Lund?
I was going to make the point that Todd made. Thank you, Mr. Weber, that these are loans. So moving forward, I think we have the time, and I appreciate Chris's comments about having that policy discussion on a portfolio basis. If someone is so inclined, I would hope that they would, in their motion, again, not dictating a motion, that they would accept the company's offer to convert to a equity type investment under the SAFE model that I and Brandon described, if you're so inclined to move these projects forward. And then we could bring more detail to the JDA.
Further questions or comments or a motion?
I'll make that motion.
What motion are you making, Mr. Holth?
The one that Keith just outlined in terms of the SAFE model.
Very good. To fund both requests under the SAFE model.
Correct.
Very good.
No, sorry, Keith. I would just say that you would be, I would think, far be it for me, I don't have a vote, but you would recommend approval of the application under the debt model and accept the company's offer to give the growth fund the option to convert to SAFE model investment within the first 3 years, should the growth fund choose to exercise that option.
Thanks for the clarification. I believe that's what Mr. Holt intended, yes?
Very good.
Verbatim, yes, thank you, Keith. Perfect.
I'll second.
It's like he's a mind reader. And we have a motion for Mr. Holt, the second for Mr. Weigel. Further questions or comments?
I will request to recuse myself, Chairman.
Yes, can we have a motion to recuse Mr. Wolf?
Make that motion.
Motion for Mr. Weigel, second for Mr. Holt. We'll first vote on that motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And now we'll go to Mr. Holt's motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Very good. In the remaining moments, do we have any remaining moments?
Let's make it so.
Make it so.
Let's make it, we have to get through the,
Item 7.
let's proceed through this last item. I think this is an important item for us to take action on.
Very good. Ms. Richards, Mr. Bombach, whoever wants to take this.
Well, for the sake of time, let's just go right to Amy.
Ms. Whitney, welcome. Oh, we've got you muted still. Muted.
I will unmute myself.
There we go.
I will make my remarks fairly quick, knowing that we're on a short time. I won't share my screen or anything like that. You were actually provided with some collateral prior to this. So, Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for our time. I was last before you a few weeks ago to update you on the submission that we had to the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration for a downtown tech hub. Good news was we were invited to submit a full proposal and a full application, and only 25% of the submitted concept proposals were invited to submit full applications. So we're really excited by that fact. And it shows the encouragement and really the merit of this proposal. So, you know, this vision, as we talked about, was really inspired by the mayor's State of the City address. And what we are proposing to do is launch a downtown tech hub as part of this proposal. In summary, this grant will provide for a project director and programming funds to coordinate the facilitation of entrepreneurial programming, assist with the streamlining of capital resources for startups, identify and formalize mentorships for various industry sectors, and enhance workforce upskill training. You heard from companies like Tailory and Airtonomy this afternoon, and these are the types of companies that we hope to incubate and scale up and be able to support with workforce in Grand Forks through this grant funding. This project leverages resources at UND, the EDC, private sector partners, and also the city, and to coordinate these entrepreneurial activities in this downtown tech hub. Why do this now? First, Grand Forks lags in our concentration of tech sector jobs, and it's time for us to address this, especially in the wake of COVID. We've learned that there's extreme value in technology solutions and tech sector opportunities, and this will provide us an opportunity for some economic resiliency in that sector. So our hope with this grant project is that it truly is an opportunity for us to grow out of this challenging time rather than to hunker down and retreat and run away from the challenges that we're faced with today. So, local support is needed from this 3-year project. The grant's a 3-year project. As presently proposed, we have would like to put forward a $1.2 million project. This is funded through $600,000 from the EDA, and we have to then find a $600,000 local match. As of right now, UND has committed $100,000. We're pursuing $200,000 in private funding, and today I'm requesting $300,000 towards that local match from the city and JDA to support the Downtown Tech Hub through the EDA Build to Scale grant project. I'd be happy to take any questions. I know we're time limited and happy to respond.
Very good. Impressive work in just 2 minutes there. Thanks.
I knew we were time limited.
Very good. So we're looking, the ask is for 300. Is that spread over the 3 years?
That we can through our funding mechanism, we can spread it however we want. Ideally, yes, it'd be spread over the 3 years. That is.
And there's in the staff report, it refers to some additional details that would be brought forward to the JDA. It's the work of this committee to review ideas, make some recommendation. Committee members, do we feel like we have enough information to make a recommendation, or do you have some questions first?
Mr. Weber.
Please, Mr. Weigel.
I don't want to make this sound bad, but I don't really have a better way of asking it. Why is the city putting in $300,000 and UND only putting in $100,000?
I mean, go ahead, Brandon.
I can jump in too. So some of the logic, as Amy kind of alluded towards in the beginning, it was really the mayoral's initiative, the tech hub, the whole vision around a tech campus downtown really brought to light on this. We're just so lucky to have the Center for Innovation and UND partners that they identified the grant opportunity. They said, let's help you write this and come in on this. And so kind of seeing this as a lead from the city and a support from UND. And I think Amy has worked pretty hard to get what she could there from UND, and we'll still keep working on that too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Brett. You kind of spoke to that a little more eloquently than I did, so thank you.
Further questions or comments? Mr. Phelan.
I was going to Mr. Weigel's questions. We are asking a motion for both the City of Grand Forks, and that could be in Fund 2163, our economic development funds, or others, and 5996, because there's other programs that we do regarding, I'll call it workforce development, entrepreneurial types of things that we could probably count towards this. So it may not be $100,000 in year of new money, but maybe we reprioritize. So we're going to take some time working with Amy on while we have a couple weeks here before it comes to JDA to see what monies that we're already setting aside in future years that could count towards this. So it may not be all new money. We may be able to count some of the things we're already investing with UND.
So rather than making a motion or voting on an up or down decision on a specific funding request, you're looking for more of a green light on, we'd like to hear more, something should be brought forward to the JDA?
That is correct.
I'll move approval.
We have a motion from Mr. Weigel.
Second.
Second from Mr. Holt. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none,
Mr.
all
Chairman,
in favor? I'm sorry, yes, Mr. Wolf, sorry.
I'm requesting to recuse myself from the voting process.
Very good. Looking for a motion to recuse Mr. Wolf.
So moved.
Have a motion for Mr. Weigel, a second for Mr. Holt. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
With that motion approved, we'll now move to the motion on the table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. With that, we'll have to forego the other items on the agenda today. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.